Mill always hated me and wanted her son to marry someone else. Then she started spreading lies about me poisoning her son when he died, so I finally took legal action against her. Mark and I met during our final year of college. We were both engineering students, and our shared passion for problem solving and innovation brought us together. Our connection was instant, and it wasn't long before we were inseparable. We moved in together shortly after graduation, and our relationship only grew stronger. We both secured good jobs in the city and started planning our future together. However, there was one major obstacle in our otherwise perfect life: Mark's mother, Evelyn. From the beginning, Evelyn had her own ideas about what Mark's life should look like, and I wasn't part of that vision. Evelyn had always hoped that Mark would marry Sarah, the daughter of her close friend. Sarah was everything Evelyn wanted in a daughter-in-law: obedient, quiet, and someone who would allow Evelyn to remain the central figure in Mark's life. I, on the other hand, was independent, outspoken, and had my own career ambitions, traits that Evelyn did not appreciate. Despite my efforts to get along with Evelyn, she made it clear that I wasn't welcome in her family. However, Mark and I were deeply in love, and we were determined to make our relationship work. We got engaged a year after moving in together, hoping that Evelyn would come around, but when we announced our engagement, Evelyn was furious. She refused to attend our wedding and went no contact with Mark shortly after, claiming that he had betrayed her by choosing me over her choice. The early days of our relationship were marked by a series of uncomfortable encounters with Evelyn. Before we got engaged, she would invite us over for occasional dinners, and each time Mark and I would go with a glimmer of hope that maybe this time things would be different, but each dinner would turn into a nightmare. Mysteriously, Sarah and her mother would always appear at these dinners as well. Evelyn would put up a pretense that this was a coincidence, but we both knew better. Throughout the dinner, Evelyn would act as if I wasn't even there. She would praise Sarah for her accomplishments, talk about how much she and Mark had in common, and make comments about how they would be such a perfect couple. Mark, to his credit, would try to include me in the conversation and would speak up for us. But Evelyn just didn't care. Her disdain for me was palpable, and it was clear that she was determined to break us apart. These dinners continued even after our engagement. Evelyn would call Mark, asking him to come over for a family dinner, insisting that she wanted to make amends and support our relationship, but each time Sarah and her mother would mysteriously be there, and the cycle would repeat. Evelyn would continue to ignore me, making it clear that she still hoped Mark would leave me for Sarah. It was exhausting, and each dinner left me feeling more isolated and hurt. Mark saw through his mother's manipulations, but it was still difficult for him to fully cut ties with her. She was, after all, his mother. As our wedding approached, the tension with Evelyn only grew. She would send Mark texts and leave voicemails, begging him to reconsider and marry Sarah instead. She claimed that marrying me would ruin his life and that he was making the biggest mistake of his life. Mark, of course, ignored her pleas and stood by me, but the emotional toll was undeniable. It was during this time that Evelyn made the decision to go no contact with Mark. She told him that if he went through with the wedding, he would no longer be her son. Mark was devastated, but he didn't let it deter him from marrying me. Our wedding day was beautiful, filled with love and happiness, but there was a lingering sadness that his mother had chosen not to be there. We tried to move on with our lives, hoping that Evelyn would eventually come around, but she never did. She refused to acknowledge our marriage, our home, or even our children when they were born. For 5 years, Evelyn remained absent from our lives, holding onto her bitterness and resentment. During those 5 years, Mark and I built a wonderful life together. His career took off, and we bought a lovely home where we raised our 2 children, a boy and a girl. Despite the absence of his mother, we were happy, but deep down I knew that the estrangement weighed heavily on Mark. He loved his mother, and it broke his heart that she couldn't accept our marriage. A few months ago, our world was turned upside down when Mark was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. The prognosis was grim, and despite the best efforts of The doctors his condition deteriorated rapidly as Mark's health declined. He made one last attempt to reach out to his mother, hoping for some form of reconciliation, but Evelyn never responded. Mark passed away with a broken heart, knowing that his mother would never accept our family. The day of Mark's funeral was a day I had dreaded since the moment we received his diagnosis. Losing Mark was the most painful experience of my life, and the thought of saying goodbye to him forever was unbearable. The funeral was a small, private affair attended by close friends, family, and colleagues who had known and loved Mark. One had deliberately chosen not to inform Evelyn about the funeral, knowing that her presence would only add to the emotional turmoil of the day, but, to my shock, Evelyn showed up. She stormed into the funeral, her face contorted with anger and resentment. The room fell silent as she marched up to me, her voice dripping with venom as she accused me of having no right to mourn Mark's death. She claimed that I had stolen her son from her and that I was the reason he was dead. Her words cut deep, but I held my ground, knowing that this was her way of dealing with her own guilt and grief. But Evelyn wasn't alone. She demanded that we settle the matter of Mark's finances before the funeral could proceed. She claimed that as his mother she had a right to whatever Mark had left behind, and that she deserved to know how his assets would be distributed. The audacity of her demand was astounding, but I wasn't entirely surprised. Evelyn had always been more concerned with control and power than with genuine love or compassion. Fortunately, Mark had anticipated that Evelyn might try something like this before he passed. He made sure that his affairs were in order. He updated his will and left detailed instructions about how his assets should be distributed. Mark had been clear in his wishes, and he had made sure that everything was legally binding. I knew that Evelyn was in for a rude awakening, but I didn't want to deal with her antics at that moment. All I wanted was to say goodbye to my husband and allow our children to grieve in peace. I wasn't ready to face my mother-in-law's wrath for what was going to happen next. I handed Evelyn the documents that outlined what Mark had left for her. She snatched the envelope from me and tore it open in a hurry, but as she read through the papers, her expression shifted from anger to disbelief and finally to devastation. Mark had left his mother nothing but a letter in it. He explained how much her actions had hurt him over the years. He told her that he had always hoped for reconciliation and but that her refusal to accept our family had left him with no choice but to cut her out of his life. He made it clear that all of his assets would go to me and our children, and that he hoped she would find peace in knowing that he had lived a happy life despite her absence. Evelyn started tearing up, and even though I thought that I could never sympathize with Evelyn again at that moment, I felt sad for her. For the first time I saw a glimmer of the woman who had once been a loving mother, but it was too late. Mark was gone, and there was no way to undo the damage that had been done. Evelyn had lost her son because of her own stubbornness and pride, and now she had to live with that regret. But as soon as I got up, I heard my mother-in-law's voice shouting, "Why would you do this?" At first, I didn't quite understand what she was saying. I chalked it up to the sad environment of a funeral where emotions were high and people were prone to outbursts, but no, this was different. The atmosphere at the funeral was already heavy with grief, and Evelyn's outburst was quickly turning into something chaotic. I tried to calm her down, keeping my voice steady, and even I told her that I understood how difficult everything was for her and assured her that it would be okay, but my attempts to soothe her only seemed to fuel her anger. She kept screaming, insisting that I had taken everything that rightfully belonged to her, that I was the reason she had nothing. I could see the guests starting to notice the commotion, their heads turning toward us. I still tried to remain diplomatic, telling Evelyn that we could discuss everything in a few hours once the funeral was over and see what we could do to address her concerns. But instead of calming down, she became even more erratic. Her voice rose as she declared that she didn't need my charity, that she didn't want anything from me. It was then that I realized what was really happening. Evelyn wasn't just venting her grief or frustration. She was making a scene, deliberately attracting the attention of the guests, and it was. Working people were beginning to gather. Around us, their whispers growing louder, as they tried to piece together what was going on. Evelyn's focus shifted from me to the gathering crowd. She was no longer talking directly to me, but addressing everyone around us, her voice thick with accusation. She told them that I had stolen everything from Mark, that I was keeping his inheritance from her, and that was refusing to give her a single penny of what was rightfully hers. The more she spoke, the more dramatic her claims became, painting me as the villain in front of everyone who had come to mourn. The guests looked on in shock and confusion, some glancing at me as if searching for confirmation or denial of her accusations. I felt the weight of their stares, the silent judgment in their eyes. It was clear that Evelyn was trying to turn them against me, to make them see her as the wronged mother who had been denied her due. The reality was far more complicated, but in that moment all they saw was a grieving woman lashing out in pain. I stood there frozen, for a moment unsure of how to respond. This was supposed to be a day to honor Mark's memory, a day for our children and me to say our final goodbyes. Instead it was turning into a spectacle, a public airing of grievances that should have remained private. I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, frustration, but I knew I had to remain composed. Reacting with anger would only feed into Evelyn's narrative and make things worse. As Evelyn continued her tirade, I noticed some of the guests beginning to exchange uneasy glances. A few of them started to approach me quietly, asking if there was anything they could do to help. But what could they do? This wasn't just about money or inheritance. It was about years of unresolved tension, about a mother's refusal to accept her son's choices, about a family that had been fractured long before this day. I took a deep breath and tried once more to address Evelyn, but it was clear she wasn't listening to me anymore. She was fully engrossed in her role as the wrong party, her voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. I could her eyes glinting with something that wasn't quite grief. It was a mixture of vindication and desperation, a need to reclaim control in whatever way she could, even if it meant turning Mark's funeral into a spectacle. The scene was spiraling out of control, and I knew that if I didn't do something, the entire day would be overshadowed by Evelyn's theatrics. I decided to step away, to distance myself from the drama that was unfolding. I couldn't let Evelyn's behavior tarnish the memory of the man I loved, the father of my children, the man we were all here to honor. I signaled to one of the funeral directors, quietly asking them to help disperse the crowd and guide people back to their seats. As I walked away, I could still hear Evelyn's voice behind me, but I forced myself not to turn back. This day wasn't about her or the fight she was trying to provoke. It was about saying goodbye to Mark with the dignity and respect he deserved. But the damage was already done. Evelyn had succeeded in creating a scene, and I knew that her words would linger in the minds of the guests. The whispers would continue, the questions would be asked, and no matter how much I tried to ignore them, there would always be people who believed her version of events. I could feel the weight of the day pressing down on me, the sadness of losing Mark, now compounded by the spectacle his mother had created. Now at present I feel so lost. I've received hundreds of suggestions on how I should proceed with this situation. Some have told me that I should give the money to Evelyn to keep the peace, but the point isn't about the money anymore. The point is that my mother-in-law created a scene at her own son's funeral simply because she hated me. I mean, she couldn't stay quiet for her own son's burial. I'm conflicted. On one hand, I want to honor Mark's wishes and protect what he left behind for our children, and because Mark and I both put our blood, sweat and tears and everything that we have now. On the other hand, I can't shake the feeling that maybe giving Evelyn something might ease the tension and allow us all to move on. But then again, would it, or would it just encourage more drama in the future? I've tried to handle this with as much grace as possible, but I'm not sure what to do next. I'm torn between standing firm and trying to make peace. What would you do in my situation? Should I just let it go and give Evelyn some of what she wants, or should I hold my ground and respect Mark's final wishes? Ida, for not giving my mill any of my husband's assets despite her being his mother. Update 1. Hi everyone, I wanted to give an update, but to be honest things have stayed the same. In fact it feels like I have sunk deeper into this pit of despair, and I feel worse than ever now that Mark is not around anymore. Everything has fallen apart, and it's as if the life I knew is crumbling beneath me. Evelyn has made my life a living hell. The drama at the funeral was just a trailer of what was to come, and I've been living in a nightmare ever since. Evelyn has made it her mission to ruin what little peace I had left. She's been going around to everyone who will listen, spinning this elaborate web of lies about how her son left his entire estate to her, but that I, his evil wife, had stolen everything from her. She's told anyone who would give her a moment that I forged the documents, that I cheated Mark on his deathbed to get his signature, and that I manipulated him in his weakest moment to secure his assets for myself. According to her, I didn't even allow her to meet her son when he was sick, that I kept him isolated from his own mother, and she's even gone as far as to claim that I was poisoning him. I feel appalled. How can a mother say such lies about her dead son's wife, especially after everything that has happened? She has no sympathy for me, no compassion for my small children who are still trying to process the loss of their father. It's as if she's consumed by this bitter hatred for me, and she's determined to make me suffer in every way possible. The rumors she's spreading have taken on a life of their own. People I thought were my friends, people who once offered their condolences, are now turning their backs on me. I'm being stormed with texts and messages, people telling me that I should be ashamed of myself, that I'm a terrible person for what I've supposedly done to my mother-in-law. They say things like, how could you do this to Evelyn? She's lost her son and you're treating her like this. It's like they've forgotten that I'm mourning to that I've lost my husband and that my children have lost their father. The stress and anxiety are overwhelming. I barely sleep, and when I do, I'm haunted by dreams of Mark, by memories of the life we had before everything went so horribly wrong. My days are spent trying to navigate this new reality, dealing with the endless messages and phone calls, and trying to shield my kids from the toxic environment that Evelyn has created. I don't have the energy for this. I'm exhausted both physically and emotionally. All I want is to grieve in peace, to find some way to move forward for the sake of my children, but it feels impossible with the way things are. And it's not just the rumors and the gossip. Evelyn has taken things even further. She started showing up at our home unannounced, banging on the door and demanding that I hand over Mark's estate to her. She yells at me through the door, accusing me of being a thief, a liar, and worse, she's told me that she'd take me to court, that she makes sure I'm left with nothing, and that she get what she's owed. It's terrifying, and I'm constantly on edge, never knowing when she might show up again. I've had to call the police on her more than once, but it's not enough to keep her away. She's relentless, and it feels like there's no escape from her wrath. I'm at my wit's end. I've considered getting a restraining order, but I worry about what that might do to my kids. They've already lost their father, and I don't want to put them through any more trauma, but at the same time, I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending that everything is okay when it's not. The only thing that's kept me going is the support from all of you. Your comments and messages have been a ray of hope in this dark time, and I can't thank you enough for that, knowing that there are people out there who understand, who see through the lies, and who are on my side has made all the difference. I'm still so conflicted. Part of me wants to fight back, to take Evelyn to court and prove that everything she's saying is a lie. I have the documents, the proof that Mark wanted me and our children to be taken care of, and I know that I'm in the right, but another part of me just wants to give in, to hand over whatever she wants and be done with it. Maybe then she'll leave us alone and we can finally have some peace. But deep down I know that even if I gave her everything, it wouldn't be enough. Evelyn would find some other way to hurt me, to punish me for taking Mark away from her. I feel trapped, like there's no good solution to any of this. I'm trying to be strong for my kids, but every day feels like a battle that I'm losing. I keep replaying the events in my mind, wondering if there was something I could have done differently, something that would have made this all less painful. But the truth is there's nothing I can do to change the past, and I have no idea how to handle the present right now. I'm just trying to take things one day at a time, but it's so hard when every day brings a new challenge, a new attack from Evelyn, or someone she's convinced to turn against me. I feel so isolated, so alone in all of this. I'm doing my best to stay strong, but there are moments when I feel like I'm about to break, and it scares me because I know that I can't afford to break, not now, not with everything that's at stake. I just wish this nightmare would end. I wish I could wake up and find that Mark is still here, that none of this ever happened, but I know that's not possible, and I have to find a way to move forward for my sake, and for the sake of my children. I just don't know how to do that when it feels like the world is crashing down around me. Thank you again for all of your support. It means more to me than I can put into words. I'll try to keep you all updated as things progress, but for now, I'm just trying to survive each day as it comes. If anyone has any advice or suggestions on how to deal with this, I'm all ears. I could really use some guidance right now, because I honestly don't know what to do anymore. Update 2. Hi everyone, I've finally taken the advice that many of you gave me. I'm done with Evelyn's relentless actions, and I refuse to tolerate this manic behavior any longer. After everything she's put me through, I realized that enough was enough. I've hired a lawyer who also happens to be a close friend of mine, and we're moving forward with a lawsuit against Evelyn. I'm suing her for harassment, emotional distress, defamation, and trespassing for all the time she's banged on my door demanding her money and causing chaos in my life. My lawyer assured me that we have a solid case. There's no shortage of evidence against Evelyn. For starters, there are hundreds of voicemails and text messages that she's bombarded me with, each one filled with venomous accusations and threats. These messages alone paint a clear picture of her ongoing harassment, but that's not all. Our home security cameras have recorded every time Evelyn showed up at my house, pounding on the door and trying to force her way inside. The recordings are undeniable proof of her trespassing, and they show just how far she's willing to go to terrorize me and my children. With all of this evidence in hand, we officially filed the case and promptly sent a legal notice to Evelyn. It was a surreal moment knowing that I was finally taking a stand and fighting back against the person who had made my life unbearable. I knew there would be backlash, and I was prepared for it, but what surprised me was the level of support I started receiving almost immediately after the legal notice was delivered. At the same time, I decided it was time to confront the people who had been attacking me based on Evelyn's lies. I replied to several of the text messages I had received over the past few days, including one from Mark's aunt. She had been very close to us, and her text had been particularly hurtful, accusing me of appalling behavior and claiming that I had taken Evelyn's rightful inheritance. It stung to read those words, especially from someone I thought knew me better than that. But one knew I had to respond, if only to set the record straight. I told Mark's aunt that while she and everyone else seemed eager to sympathize with Evelyn's loss, not one of them had considered for a second that I had lost my partner, the love of my life. I was grieving, trying to cope with an unimaginable loss while pretending to be strong for the sake of my kids. I explained to her exactly what had happened, that Mark had made sure our children and I would be taken care of, and that everything Evelyn was saying was a lie. I made it clear that this was the first and last time I would explain myself to anyone regarding this situation moving forward. I asked that all of them maintain their distance from me and my family. I needed to focus on healing and protecting my children, and I couldn't do that if I was constantly being attacked and questioned by those who should have been supporting me. It was a difficult message to send, but it felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Once it was done, I finally felt like I had some form of control over the situation, something that had been sorely lacking since Mark's death. And surprisingly, it seems that Mark took my words to heart. She must have shared what I told her with the rest of the family because within hours I was flooded with texts again, but this time the messages were filled with apologies. People who had been so quick to judge me, to believe the worst about me, were now reaching out to say they were sorry they told me they had been wrong to believe Evelyn's lies, that they had let their emotions cloud the judgment. Some even admitted that they had been swept up in Evelyn's grief and hadn't stopped to consider what I might be going through. It was a relief to know that the truth was finally coming to light, that at least some of the people who had turned against me were now starting to see things for what they really were. I'm not going to pretend that everything is suddenly okay, because it's not. The pain of losing Mark is still there, and it will be for a long time, but it is a bit relaxing to know that at least my friends and family now understand that I wasn't the one in the wrong. I'm still receiving support from those who truly care about me, and it means the world to me to know that I'm not alone in this fight. For now I'm focusing on carrying on with my life, taking care of my kids, and seeing how the lawsuit progresses. I'm hopeful that things will be in our favor, and that once this is all over we'll finally be able to move on and find some peace. I know it won't be easy, but I'm determined to see this through for myself and for my children. To all of you who have been following my story and offering your advice and support, I can't thank you enough. Your guidance has gotten me this far, and don't know where I'd be without your encouragement. You've been my saviors during this troubling time, and I'm forever grateful for that. I'll keep you all updated as things progress, but for now I'm taking things one step at a time and hoping for the best. Thank you with all my heart. Update 3. Hi everyone, I hope you're all doing well. It's been a while since I last updated, but something significant has happened and I wanted to share it with you all. Just a day or two after we filed the lawsuit, Evelyn sent me an email. In it she expressed what she claimed to be genuine remorse, saying that she was deeply sorry for everything she had done. She wrote that she had been blinded by grief and didn't realize the extent of her actions. Evelyn even promised to keep a check on her behavior moving forward and assured me that she would maintain her distance from my family and me. Honestly, I didn't believe her for a second. After years of her toxic behavior and the recent days of sheer hell that she put us through, I found it hard to accept that she suddenly felt apologetic. It was clear to me that this email was a reaction to the legal notice we had sent her. The timing was too convenient, and the tone of the email felt like she was trying to cover herself rather than actually making amends, so I chose not to respond to her email at all. I knew better than to fall for what felt like yet another one of her manipulative tactics. Later that day I received an unexpected visit from Mark's, and initially I was hesitant to see her after everything she had accused me of, but I reminded myself that she had come to understand my side of the story. If nothing else, I owed it to the memories of better times to hear her out. As soon as we sat down, she began apologizing profusely for everything she had said and done. I could tell she was genuinely remorseful, and I appreciated her willingness to admit that she had been wrong. I told her that it was okay now that I understood she had been caught up in the chaos and emotions surrounding Mark's death. I reassured her that not everything was her fault and that I didn't hold a grudge against her. After we exchanged a bit of small talk, she got to the real reason for her visit. It turned out that Evelyn had been spiraling ever since she received news about the lawsuit. Apparently she was beside herself with worrying. She realized that she couldn't afford the financial and emotional toll of a legal battle, and she never anticipated that things would escalate this far. Essentially, she hadn't expected me to take any real action against her. I listened to what Markin had to say, but I remained firm in my resolve. I told her that this lawsuit was happening and that Evelyn had to face the consequences of her actions. There was no going back. Now, Evelyn had crossed too many lines, and she needed to understand that her behavior had real-world consequences. After we discussed a few more things, Markson left, but her visit got me thinking. I wanted Evelyn to be held accountable for everything she had done, but at the same time I was acutely aware that a drawn-out lawsuit would be mentally and emotionally taxing, not just for me, but for my kids as well. The last thing I wanted was to prolong the pain and stress we were already feeling. I decided to call my lawyer friend and explain the situation. We discussed the possibility of finding an alternative resolution that wouldn't involve going through a lengthy legal process. My lawyer came up with a solution that seemed like the best of both worlds. We could withdraw the lawsuit, but only if Evelyn agreed to sign a settlement agreement. The terms would include a binding commitment from Evelyn to never trouble my family again. She would be legally required to maintain a safe distance from both of my children and me. Additionally, the agreement would state that Mark had left all of his estate to us and none to her, and that she fully accepted this decision. After we finalized the details, my lawyer reached out to Evelyn to inform her of the offer. It didn't take long for Evelyn to realize that this was the best outcome she could hope for. She agreed to the terms, and very soon after we withdrew the lawsuit and had the settlement agreement signed. While this didn't erase all the damage she had done, it did bring a sense of closure to the situation. Even after the agreement was signed, Evelyn made several attempts to apologize to me, but her words no longer held any meaning. I had heard enough lies and excuses from her to last a lifetime, and I wasn't interested in hearing any more. The damage had been done, and while I was willing to let go of the legal battle, I wasn't willing to let her back into my life in any meaningful way. Now it finally feels like things might settle down. I feel like I can finally think clearly without the constant dread of Evelyn's next move hanging over me. The road ahead is still difficult, and I miss Mark more than words can express, but at least with this chapter behind us, my children and I can focus on healing and moving forward. I want to extend my deepest thanks to all of you who have supported me through this ordeal. Your advice and encouragement have been invaluable, and I don't know where I would be without the strength you've helped me find. For now, I'm taking things one day at a time, but I'm hopeful that the worst is behind us. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your kindness has been a beacon of light during one of the darkest times of my life.